What if everything you know about demons was a distraction? Not lies, just the wrong focus. While people summon names, draw circles, and call forth spirits, 4 ancient thrones have been controlling reality from the shadows, not with fire, not with fear, with structure. These aren't the loud, chaotic monsters Hollywood sold you. These are kings, silent, precise, and far older than sin itself. And the scariest part, you don't need to believe in them. They already rule you. These 4 kings don't sit in hell waiting for lost souls. They sit at the corners of your perception, governing how you think, feel, move, and crave. Their thrones aren't made of stone. They're made of habits, memories, silence, and desire. You see their sigils in architecture, religion, even your daily routine. But no one ever told you what they really were. Until now, this isn't just another demon list. This is the map beneath the map, the geometry behind your rituals, the code hidden in your cravings. Once you see how the infernal hierarchy actually works, how these 4 kings align with your very being, you'll never look at demonology the same way again. And if you stay till the end, you might just find the key to stepping outside their rule entirely. Long before any angel ever sang, 4 thrones pulsed beneath the fabric of reality, not as myths, but as primal anchors of a deeper structure. These weren't thrones of gold or marble, but energetic pillars forged in fire, humming beneath the crust of what we call existence. In true demonology explained, the 4 kings of hell aren't mere names in forbidden grimoires. They are ancient demonic thrones, spiritual software wired into the architecture of this inverted world. The Goetia isn't just a list of entities, it's a machine, and these kings, they are the wheels, the gears, the gravity that keeps the entire infernal hierarchy from collapsing. Every magic ritual, every occult initiation, whether the magician realizes it or not, echoes through one of these 4. They are astral gatekeepers sealed by infernal seals, and once you start to notice their influence, it becomes impossible to unsee. Because you don't summon them, they're already there, watching. Picture this structure not as metaphor, but as geometry. 4 cardinal points, each one guarded by a force so ancient it predates the concept of good and evil. These kings, Amaymon, Corson, Ziminiar, and Gup, do not rule lands, they rule angles of consciousness. That's why true demon kings explained aren't about physical dominion but spiritual jurisdiction. Each king governs a quadrant of the soul, tilting human perception in specific directions. This is the hidden spiritual structure encoded into the very act of drawing a ritual circle. Think about it. Why do magicians always call upon the 4 corners? Why mark the east, west, north, and south? Because the prison needs walls, and those walls are alive. These kings are not symbols. They are functions, and the way they influence you is not always through fear, but through subtle control of your inner compass. There's a reason why many experience strange synchronicities or mental disturbances after studying the Goetia in depth. It's not paranoia, it's resonance. Once your awareness grazes these thrones, they graze back. The grimoires of power hint at it, but never say it outright. These aren't entities you call, they're entities you remember, because on some level, you've met them before. Perhaps in dreams, moments of déjà vu, or those eerie silences when time seems to skip. These 4 kings of the Goetia operate in reverse, pulling you in not with noise, but with silence, distortions, and unseen gravity. They are masters of dark spiritual forces, thriving in forgotten rituals and misaligned energy, and the more you chase them with logic, the deeper they drag you into the symbolic. That's why so many initiates fall, not from failure, but from trying to name what should only be faced. In esoteric symbolism, each of these kings is tied not just to direction, but to distortion. A Maimon bends the light until you confuse truth with illumination. Corson feeds you nostalgia until it becomes a chain. Ziminia unravels the mind through forgetfulness. And Gap, he twists desire into obsession. These aren't just demons. They are systemic errors coded into the matrix of human consciousness. And through magic rituals, they're accessed, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. Have you ever had a thought that felt implanted? A craving that didn't belong to you, a spiritual high followed by an existential crash. These are not accidents. They are echoes, echoes of a royal structure still intact, still watching, still active. And most people walk straight into their influence, thinking they're in control. It's easy to dismiss this as metaphor until you meet someone who's crossed the threshold. I once knew a ritualist who, after obsessively invoking directional spirits, lost all sense of orientation in real life. North felt like south. Time bent. Words reversed mid-sentence. Doctors said it was dissociation, but we knew better. The seals of the cardinal kings had been disturbed. The ancient spiritual prison they uphold isn't just for lost souls. It's also for seekers too bold to respect the structure. This is the danger of working with the occult knowledge without understanding the throne of a Maimon or the chain of Ziminia. The Goetia kings do not punish like angry gods. They reorganize your mind like chess pieces, and when you're out of alignment, you'll feel it everywhere. Sleep, speech, shadow. That's why most elite cults don't just summon these entities. They build entire systems around their geometry. Secret societies, ancient temples, even the layout of cities are often designed in accordance with the cardinal quadrants of hell. These are the deeper secrets of demonology, secrets hidden not just in text, but in architecture, maps, and political power. Because once you understand the four kings of hell as a spiritual map, you start seeing their fingerprints on everything. From the obelisks of Washington to the sigils in Masonic halls, the world is saturated with their echo. They don't need worship, they need repetition, echoes, alignment, which means the most dangerous ritual isn't one done in a cave. It's the one repeated daily without question, and that's where the real trap lies. Most people think the Goetia is about summoning demons into the room, but the deeper truth, the forbidden truth, is that the room was built by them. The four kings are not intruders, they are engineers. Every time you light a candle, draw a circle, chant a name, or even believe in a hierarchy, you're stepping into their framework. And the only reason you haven't noticed is because they've sealed your awareness from the inside. But once you start seeing the signs, the dreams, the symbols, the distortions, something begins to crack. A subtle pull begins toward the east, the west, the north, or the south. And that's exactly where we're heading next. They don't govern territory, they govern orientation. That's the hidden principle behind the infernal compass, a structure so elegantly deceptive it hides in plain sight. The four cardinal kings of the Ars Goetia, Maimon, Corson, Ziminia, and Gap, don't just rule directions. They define the boundaries of your spiritual perception. This is demonology explained at a level most never touch. Reality isn't flat, and neither is your soul. Each quadrant they command corresponds not to geography, but to how you experience self, others, time, and power. And once your perception is tethered to a throne, you begin to see the trap. You begin to realize you've been navigating not by instinct, but by design, by an ancient infernal GPS. A Maimon is not just east in a spatial sense. He's the illusion of origin, the false dawn that blinds you with knowledge before you're ready. Corson, ruling the west, isn't sunset. He's the echo of everything you've refused to bury, rising at dusk to haunt you. Ziminia, north, doesn't point up. He points into the frozen silence where memory dies. And Garp, the southern king, anchors you in the fire of craving, burning you forward until your desires become directions. These are not poetic metaphors. This is the occult knowledge behind why ancient temples, obelisks, and even churches align themselves to cardinal points. Not for glory, for control, for sealing the world in geometry older than language. Look closely at ritualistic design, whether in magical lodges, cathedral blueprints, or military insignia, and you'll find a perfect square, a cross, or a compass. The architecture of power mirrors the layout of hell's cardinal kings. These are not coincidences, they are signatures. Through forbidden grimoires and grimoires of power, elite cults have long understood that to dominate a society, one must divide the collective psyche into 4 controllable parts. That's why so many magic rituals begin by opening the 4 gates or calling the quarters. You're not summoning elements, you're granting access to Goetic kings. You're inviting a recalibration of your being. You might be wondering, if they control perception, what does that look like in my daily life? It's subtle, like being emotionally stuck in the past without knowing why. Corson's touch, or feeling obsessed with spiritual growth that leads to burnout, Amemon's trap. Physical disorientation, unexplained fatigue, or sleep paralysis, Ximinia's chill, and a persistent desire for more, knowledge, experience, validation that leads nowhere. That's gap, distorting your internal compass. These kings do not need to appear in your mirror to influence you. Their thrones sit behind the curtain, quietly rewiring how you navigate your own mind. This hidden spiritual structure bleeds into how civilizations rise and fall. Cultures based in the West often glorify nostalgia, identity, and ancestral trauma. Corson's reign. Eastern spiritual traditions, when corrupted, fixate on enlightenment as performance. Amemon's flair. Northern myths emphasize death, stoicism, and amnesia. Ximinia's frost. Southern traditions dance with spirit and passion, but often lose themselves in sensation. Gap's inferno. When viewed through the lens of dark, esoteric lore, the entire world becomes a chessboard, and the pieces, human souls. Souls who have no idea they're being moved by kings no one remembers naming. In private esoteric schools, initiates are sometimes asked to meditate while facing each direction, not just as a spiritual exercise, but as a test. East brings headaches, West triggers dreams, North can induce full dissociation, South, hallucinations. These aren't placebo effects, they are interactions with the prison's architecture. A real example. An adept I once knew began waking up every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., facing the east, drenched in sweat, chanting syllables he didn't remember learning. He thought he was ascending, but in truth, he'd walked straight into Amemon's gate, blindfolded. That's how the 4 kings work. They don't attack. They invite you to walk into their domain willingly. And here's the most disturbing part. They don't need worshippers. They need alignment. These demon kings explained in ancient texts have always preferred influence over obedience. That's why even skeptics fall under their rule. Because you don't have to believe in them for the compass to turn. It already does. Your mind is the needle, and their thrones are magnetic. And once you feel the pull, once you sense the distortions in time, memory, desire, and identity, you realize the game is older than your thoughts. And that, perhaps, the gate you've always faced, and was never random. It was placed, and the Eastern Gate is the first one to knock. Amemon is the master of paradox, the king who comes cloaked in brilliance, offering enlightenment that leads not to freedom, but to entrapment. He is the Eastern Gate, and in the occult esoteric map of hell, East is not just sunrise, it's the illusion of awakening. Amemon rules over false beginnings, the kind that feel like progress but secretly bind you tighter. In Demonology Explained, He is often portrayed as regal and wise, and that's precisely the trap. His power lies in appearing as the answer to your deepest questions. But what he offers is a mirror, one that reflects back what your ego wants to see. And once you accept his mask of illumination, you stop seeking. You think you've arrived, and that's exactly where the prison begins. In grimoires of power and forbidden grimoires, a Maimon is named with caution. Not because he's violent, but because he is seductive. His weapon is agreement. He whispers ideas that sound just right enough to bypass your critical mind. You've already learned enough. You don't need to question your teacher. This is the true path. And so the magic ritual becomes repetition, the teacher becomes gospel, the seeker becomes a follower. This is how a Maimon establishes his throne, by converting seekers into believers without rebellion. Among the 4 kings of the Goetia, his influence is the hardest to notice. Because it doesn't feel like corruption, it feels like confidence. He rules not just over the mind, but over spiritual ambition, the desire to ascend, the obsession with knowledge, enlightenment, higher self, and light codes. But what most don't realize is that obsession is still a chain, only polished. I've seen countless modern initiates fall into this trap. They chase books, crystals, seminars, gurus. They chant, fast, travel to sacred lands. But deep down, they're addicted to the idea of growth, not the substance. That's Amamon's influence. He keeps you climbing a staircase that goes in circles, and by the time you look down, you've built a tower of light, inside a cage. Many false prophets, both ancient and modern, unknowingly channel his energy. The ones who demand loyalty, the ones who redefine enlightenment as hierarchy, the ones who sell spiritual possession as initiation. These are echoes of a Maimon's throne. It's not always their fault. Some of them truly believe they are helping, but if you look closely, you'll see the same pattern: obedience disguised as awakening. In the dark spiritual forces that shape New Age movements and corrupted orders, a Maimon's seal is everywhere, not in blood or symbols, but in the language of absolute truth. I once met a self-proclaimed mystic who claimed to channel divine beings. His followers treated him like a savior, but behind closed doors, he monitored dreams, controlled relationships, and demanded emotional confessions as offerings. He didn't wear a crown. He wore white robes and smiled constantly. That was our Maimon, not in form, but in function. The throne of a Maimon is built not on fear, but on charisma. His is the mask that makes you lower your guard, open your soul, and hand him the key. And he'll smile as you do it, telling you how wise you are. But his presence isn't limited to cults or spiritual leaders. He lives in any system that rewards obedience disguised as intelligence. School systems, corporate ladders, religious dogma, all are stained with his sigil. That's why the seal of a Maimon, once internalized, is so difficult to break. It's not just a symbol, it's a worldview, a hidden spiritual structure that convinces you you're climbing, when in fact you're circling. The only way to break it: ask dangerous questions, doubt the answers that feel too perfect, step into the silence between words, because that's where his mask begins to melt. And the most ironic part, a Maimon teaches you how to question, just never him. He gives you rituals to access truth, but hides the fact that the tools themselves are biased. He'll let you explore dark, esoteric lore, so long as you don't question the foundation. That's the brilliance of his gate. It doesn't look like a gate. It looks like the sunrise. And the moment you chase that light without discernment, you cross the threshold. But what's on the other side isn't revelation. It's Corson, waiting in the west, whispering the past. Corson is not loud. He doesn't roar, command, or seduce. He whispers, and in that whisper is the weight of 1,000 forgotten lifetimes. As the Western king in the infernal hierarchy, Corson doesn't offer temptation. He offers remembrance, but not the liberating kind, rather, the kind that chains the soul to unresolved echoes. In demonology explained, Corson is the keeper of ancestral weight, karmic debt, and spiritual nostalgia. He doesn't reign with fire. He rules through guilt. You won't feel him enter, but one day you'll wake up surrounded by old photographs, regrets, and dreams that feel too familiar to be random. That's how you know. Corson has placed his hand on your shoulder and turned you toward the past. He is the embodiment of the phrase, what if? What if you had chosen differently? What if you hadn't hurt that person? What if you had kept going? Corson doesn't answer these questions. He loops them. He is the master of unresolved memory, the spiritual distortion that keeps you replaying conversations in your head years after they happened. His throne is forged from broken promises, both given and received. And through magic rituals and astral interactions, Corson implants dreams, visions of other lives, other paths, other yous. Some mistake this for divine insight, but those well-versed in occult knowledge know better. It's regression, it's gravity, it's a mirror that only reflects backwards. Corson's influence is particularly devastating for healers, mystics, and those on the spiritual path. The more you dive into inner work, the more he offers clues from the past life visions, ancestral patterns, childhood trauma, all valid until they become prisons. Corson's seal activates when reflection becomes identity. When healing becomes fixation, he doesn't need you to worship him. He only needs you to keep looking back. In dark esoteric lore, he is often tied to the moon, specifically the waning phase, when light fades and shadows stretch longer. And like the moon's pull on the tides, Corson pulls on the subconscious. Gentle, inevitable. In some forbidden grimoires, Corson is linked to forgotten languages, those spoken in sleep, in trance, in grief. I've met ritualists who, after repeated work in the Western Quadrant, began hearing lullabies in dialects they never studied. One wept uncontrollably when a voice called her by a name she didn't recognize, but felt, this is Corson, not cruel, but precise. His throne is memory, but not yours alone. It's the memory of bloodlines, spirits, and lands buried under centuries of silence. And when he awakens, he doesn't scream. He mourns, and his mourners are your thoughts, your guilt, your longing. Corson's mark is also found in repetitive behavior that makes no logical sense. The person who keeps choosing the same toxic partner. The addict who relapses every full moon. The seeker who returns to the same painful meditation, hoping for breakthrough but finding only exhaustion. These are not mere patterns, they are rituals, unconscious offerings to the Western king. He doesn't punish, he reflects. He places your shadow in front of you and waits, and the more you reject it, the more it tightens around your life. That's the silent agreement. Ignore the lesson, relive the loop. His presence is strongest in dreams, especially the ones where you're home, but something is wrong. Familiar streets with strange turns, dead relatives smiling without speaking, rooms from your childhood that don't look quite right. These are not dreams, these are doors, and Corson is the doorman. Many cultures mistake his influence for ancestors trying to communicate. Sometimes that's true, but Corson often uses ancestral energy as bait. Because nothing binds a soul like the belief that it owes someone something, especially someone already gone. Corson rules the West, but not the way maps suggest. He governs the sun setting on your awareness. He is the veil that lowers just as you think you're waking up. And when the sun goes down, when silence floods in, his whisper begins again. Do you remember? And if you answer, if you linger in that pull, you'll find yourself drifting north, where silence is no longer memory, but erasure. Ziminiar is the most elusive of the four kings, and that's by design. In demonology explained, his name appears rarely, and when it does, it's often in footnotes, glimpsed rather than proclaimed. But don't be fooled by his silence. Among the Hell's royal hierarchy, Ziminiar wears the northern crown, the throne of erasure, the force behind memory collapse and identity breakdown. He doesn't tempt, nor whisper, nor shine. He subtracts. To feel Ziminiar is to feel the blank space where something important used to be. Forgetting names, losing time, staring into nothing with a sense that something's watching. These are not quirks. These are symptoms of a gate being opened. Ziminiar governs the body, but not in the physical sense. He rules the vessel, the container of awareness. His throne influences the bones, the nervous system, the postures we adopt when we're no longer human, but hollow. Many accounts of spiritual possession, especially the ones with no memory, no voice change, just a blackout, are linked to him. In occult knowledge, Ziminiar's energy is associated with polar stillness, the kind found in ancient ice, black holes, or abandoned places. He doesn't pull you in with force. He freezes the path behind you until you can't remember how you got here. And when you can't recall your way out, you stop trying. There's a reason he's almost absent from most grimoires of power. His presence disrupts transmission itself. Stories about him tend to vanish. Pages tear mysteriously. Audio cuts out. I've personally witnessed 3 separate grimoires with Ziminiar's name smudged into illegibility. That's not weathering, that's the seal working. The chain of silence isn't metaphor, it's functional. He guards the threshold between knowing and forgetting, and to invoke him is to challenge your own grasp of identity. Many who seek altered states through astral projection or DMT rituals unknowingly pass through his gate, and some never fully return. They lose words, faces, purpose. One practitioner I knew, after a series of unprotected rituals in the northern quadrant, began to stutter, then to forget common nouns, then to forget his own address. Doctors blamed early cognitive decline. But in our circle, we knew the truth. Ziminiar had taken residence, not as a parasite, but as a cleansing, because that's how he operates. He doesn't possess, he deletes. And when he removes enough of your personality, something else can enter, or nothing, which may be worse. That's the danger of invoking dark spiritual forces without understanding their nature. You think you're unlocking power, but sometimes you're unlocking absence. Ziminiar's seal is also activated in ritualistic silence, not the peaceful kind, but the oppressive kind, when a room goes too quiet, when a group falls into collective muteness, when the air feels thick, but no one speaks. His influence is common in cults where speaking forbidden truths results in exile or punishment. He reigns in systems where erasure is survival, military indoctrination, authoritarian religions, even certain schools of meditation. The less you say, the less you question. The less you remember, the less you rebel. That is Ziminiar's doctrine. Control not through belief, but through void. He also appears during high strangeness events, time slips, parallel memories, Mandela effect experiences. People often attribute these to glitches in the matrix. But those who study the hidden spiritual structure of the infernal hierarchy know better. These phenomena often follow attempts to break alignment. When your spirit drifts too far from the imposed grid, Ziminiar acts as the enforcer, not with violence, but with the erasure of orientation. Your past feels altered, your thoughts grow foggy, you hesitate, and in that hesitation, he binds you to stillness. And that's why his gate is the most terrifying. You don't walk through it. You forget you're standing there. Ziminiar is the chain that doesn't feel like a chain, the king that doesn't demand worship, just silence. And once he crowns you with it, your story begins to unravel. which makes the southern gate more seductive than ever, because, after silence, desire becomes a scream. Goetia is the gate you walk through smiling, only to realize, too late, that your soul never followed. As the southern king in the infernal hierarchy, Goetia governs the deepest layer of spiritual manipulation, desire itself. In demonology explained, he's often linked to astral travel, hidden knowledge, and seductive power. But none of these are gifts, they're bait. Goetia doesn't offer what you need. He amplifies what you want, until it swells beyond recognition. He is the distorting lens, the heat shimmer in the desert, the echo that promises more if you just go a little further. And once you do, you're lost in craving. Craving for sensation, for meaning, for the illusion of control. He's not inherently evil. He's a mirror like the others, but his is covered in flame, and what it reflects is what you deny. Goetia rules the spirit quadrant of the hidden spiritual structure, and that makes him dangerous to those who confuse power with purpose. Many initiates fall here. They perform magic rituals seeking clarity and come back addicted to the ritual itself. They chase spiritual highs like junkies, measuring progress by visions, energy rushes, and validation from spirits. Goetia doesn't need to deceive you directly. He just lets you deceive yourself. That's why he's revered and feared across countless forbidden grimoires. One of Goetia's most insidious talents is warping the will. He doesn't remove it, he reprograms it. Your goals start to shift subtly, from growth to domination, from service to performance. You begin to meditate not to find peace, but to look powerful. You study occult knowledge not to understand, but to be admired. It starts innocently, I want to be stronger. Then one day you find yourself invoking demons you barely researched just to feel something. That's Goetia. He doesn't take your soul. He makes you spend it willingly, one unexamined ritual at a time. In ancient texts and dark esoteric lore, Goetia is linked to the temptation of the shortcut, the spiritual hack, the fast track to power. And let's be honest, we've all wanted that. Who wouldn't want to speak with spirits? Bend probability, escape this decaying world for a moment of astral ecstasy. Goetia whispers, why not? He offers results, and he delivers, but there's always a twist. Every gift costs alignment, every gain comes with distortion, and after enough transactions, you no longer know why you started. Your will isn't your own. It's been rerouted through the throne of the South. I once witnessed a practitioner who became obsessed with lucid dreaming. It started as innocent exploration, but over months she began skipping meals, isolating herself, refusing sunlight, just to deepen her astral capacity. She thought she was evolving, but her physical health collapsed, her mental clarity eroded, and her dreams turned from lucid to parasitic. Entities began appearing. Some named themselves. One was Goetia. She didn't summon him. She aligned with him without realizing. And that's the hidden danger. You don't need a sigil to invite a king. You just need to want too much. Goetia also corrupts intention, especially when masked as compassion or truth-seeking. That's why he often infiltrates spiritual communities under the guise of freedom or gnosis. But watch closely. Beneath the rhetoric, there's always hierarchy, control, and obsession. He thrives in systems that reward spectacle, where the loudest are seen as the wisest, where downloads and channelings become status symbols. In such circles, you'll find Goetia's seal, not as a demon to fear, but as a frequency already playing beneath the surface. And once you're attuned, desire becomes doctrine. That's why, among the four kings of the Goetia, Goetia is the one most mistaken for progress. He makes you feel powerful while hollowing you out. He feeds you meaning while stripping away discernment. And as your cravings grow louder, your intuition grows quieter, until all that's left is a flicker, a pull toward more. And that's when his gate swings wide, because after desire twists your path, you start to question what else might be missing. What other kings were forgotten? What throne might have vanished, and why? Not every king was meant to be remembered. Some were erased, not by accident, but by design. In demonology explained, we're taught there are 4 cardinal kings of hell, but dig deeper into forbidden grimoires, and whispers emerge. There was once a 5th, a throne that didn't just govern a direction, but the entire axis around which the others turned. This throne didn't collapse from war or betrayal. It collapsed from removal, a deliberate deletion from the infernal hierarchy, like a king exiled from memory, whose name still echoes through broken rituals, unaligned magic, and corrupted bloodlines. Who was he? Baal, Belial, or something older, nameless, rotting beneath the structure? Some say this 5th king didn't fall. He was absorbed, that his essence bled into the others, fracturing across the 4 thrones and creating distortion. That's why none of the current kings feel whole. Emamen shines too brightly, Corson mourns too deeply, Ziminia forgets too much, Gap desires too wildly. It's as if each inherited a shard of something more ancient, more sovereign. This isn't just poetic, this is structural. In occult knowledge, fragmentation always points to something hidden, something so dangerous it had to be scattered. And the collapse of the 5th throne may explain why our spiritual compass doesn't just guide, it misleads. There are accounts, buried in the margins of grimoires of power, that describe failed rituals where no entity appeared, but the space felt occupied. Practitioners report cold sweats, inverted symbols, words speaking themselves backwards. These aren't misfires, these are bleed-throughs. The 5th king may not answer, but his absence does. He exists in the gap between alignment and error, between calling and forgetting. He is the shadow behind the 4, never seen, but always watching. The unnameable that rattles chains when the geometry is wrong. The 5th seal that won't open, because it already was. Why erase him? Because systems require predictability. The 4 kings offer a structure, a compass, a ritual grid. But a 5th, that would destabilize everything. It would introduce paradox, an angle with no opposite, a gate with no cardinal pair. That's why the occult esoteric map of hell is drawn as a square, never a pentagram, not really. The pentagram points outward, into the unknown. And the 5th king was the unknown, a being who ruled the in-between. His throne wasn't placed on direction, it was on intention, and perhaps that's why he had to go, because intention is the one thing you can't easily control. Some scholars of dark esoteric lore believe the 5th throne still exists, buried beneath the others, that each time a magic ritual fails in ways that defy explanation, it's his hand, that the 5th king became a virus in the structure, no longer enthroned but embedded, a glitch in the spiritual code. That's why even seasoned magicians report phantom kings, voices that speak in the silence between invocations, eyes that blink from closed sigils. That's not the 4, that's the one beneath them, and if his seal ever fully reforms, the compass may shatter. The most terrifying theory, that he was never a king but the architect, that the 4 thrones were his design, each crafted to seal one quadrant of the soul. And when he was erased, the system went rogue. The kings remained, but no longer served. They adapted, evolved, became thrones unto themselves. This would explain the increasing spiritual instability in our age. People waking up misaligned, torn between craving and memory, silence and false light. Not because the kings are rising, but because their creator is. So the question isn't who the 5th king was. It's, where is he now? If his name was removed, what took its place? What happens when an entire generation practices rituals built on an incomplete map? Perhaps you've felt it. That strange drift during invocations, that sense that someone or something is missing from the circle. Something that used to be there. Something that might still be waiting. The four kings of hell don't rule through armies. They rule through alignment. Each one governs not only a quadrant of the spiritual compass, but a layer of your being. In Demonology Explained, this is one of the most overlooked truths. Their power lies in the way they influence your inner structure, mind, emotion, body, and spirit. These aren't poetic associations. They are functional connections within the occult, esoteric map of hell. Amaymon governs the mind, Corson the emotions, Ziminia the body, and Garp the spirit. Together, they form the four seals of command, a system designed not to punish, but to bind the soul through its own architecture. When Amaymon controls the mind, he doesn't shout commands. He offers clarity that subtly leads you into dogma. His influence makes you believe you've chosen your beliefs, when in fact, they've been implanted. Mental loops, rigid ideologies, spiritual overconfidence. These are signs his seal is active. In magic rituals, this may show as obsessive research, visions of fake illumination, or gurus that feel perfect. The mind stops asking and starts obeying, and all of it feels comfortable. That's the danger. Amaymon doesn't dominate. He aligns you until you can't tell the difference between your voice and his throne. Corson's seal sits in the heart, but not to inspire love, instead to flood you with memory, longing, and regret. His command is emotional inertia. You want to heal but can't. You want to forgive, but something keeps twisting the knife. Repeating dreams, recurring traumas, sudden tears during rituals. These are the whispers of Corson. His emotional loops keep you tethered to identities that no longer serve you. The past becomes sacred, pain becomes home, and slowly you stop feeling now. In the hidden spiritual structure of the infernal hierarchy, Corson is the echo chamber of the soul. Ziminia's seal doesn't speak, it pulses. It binds itself to the body like frost on bone. His influence isn't emotional or mental, it's physical. Chronic fatigue with no medical cause, sleep paralysis, dissociative symptoms, a disconnection between thought and movement. In cases of extreme alignment, ritualists report their limbs moving involuntarily or waking up with symbols drawn they don't remember making. Ziminia doesn't possess, he dampens. He lowers your frequency so much that the body becomes a vessel for anything stronger. That's why his throne is called the chain of silence. He doesn't make you scream, he makes you still. Garp, meanwhile, commands the spirit, but not to guide it, to distort it. He doesn't need to move you physically or mentally, he only needs to reroute your purpose. Have you ever chased something spiritual so intensely it burned you out? That's Garp. When every ritual becomes a craving, when every practice feels like a performance, when desire itself becomes doctrine. His seal activates when your spirit is aligned more with obsession than insight. The soul becomes a sponge, soaking in every experience but never digesting. And when it's full of contradictions and cravings, Garp rules effortlessly. The most terrifying realization is this: you don't need to invoke these kings to be under their command. You only need to live unconsciously. Most people unknowingly activate one or more of these seals just by moving through life, through trauma, ambition, routine. That's why these kings are described as thrones, not just beings, because their influence is structural. They don't visit you. They live in the frameworks you adopt, education systems, religious beliefs, social roles. Every time you say, "This is just who I am," a throne trembles with satisfaction. Breaking the four seals isn't about rebellion, it's about realignment. But to do that, you have to first know which seal is active. Is your mind rigid and righteous? Amaymon holds it. Are your emotions tied to the past? Corson has his grip. Does your body feel disconnected, heavy, foreign? Ziminia is close. Do you hunger endlessly for meaning, power, experience? Gape smiles in the dark. To free yourself, you must name the influence. You must map the distortion, because only then can you rewrite the command. But what happens when someone breaks all four seals? What exists outside the grip of these kings? Is it freedom? Or something even older, even deeper? Perhaps the ones who broke the structure glimpsed a throne that didn't command, but awakened. A fifth key, a silent axis beneath the compass, one we're about to confront. The four kings of hell don't demand temples. They already have them. You've walked through them, sat beneath their symbols, repeated their geometry without ever realizing. In demonology explained, their influence stretches far beyond the astral or magical. They are embedded in the very architecture of human society. The elites who study forbidden grimoires and grimoires of power understood this long ago. That's why ancient cults, royal bloodlines, and secret societies didn't just honor the kings, they aligned their rituals, cities, and empires with them. This is the ritual of quadrants, a global spell cast in stone, language, and law, not for worship, for control. Take a bird's-eye view of Washington, D.C., Vatican City, or Masonic temples. The cross, the square, the obelisk, the four gates. These are not design choices. They are seals, markers of allegiance to the cardinal points of hell. A Mammon in the east, Corson in the west, Ziminiar in the north, Garp in the south, each one mapped, honored, and activated through symbols hidden in plain sight. In occult knowledge, these spatial arrangements are not just aesthetic, they influence human consciousness. Walk long enough through a city aligned to these quadrants, and your mind begins to behave in predictable patterns. Your will bends, and you never even notice. These cults and elites don't need to perform open rituals anymore. The structure does the work. Every national anthem, school pledge, courtroom oath, and military rank echoes the hierarchy of the kings. These are the modern magic rituals. That's why the kings no longer need followers. They need echoes, repetition, ritualized behavior repeated unconsciously by millions. When a structure is repeated enough times, it becomes reality. And when millions follow it, it becomes a throne. That's how the Hell's royal hierarchy has lasted this long, by disguising itself as order, tradition, culture. What looks like governance is worship. This is why ancient priesthoods were more than spiritual guides. They were engineers of alignment. Through chants, feasts, architecture, and bloodlines, they preserved the king's influence. Even the calendar we use, the time zones we follow, the cross-shaped roads we drive, all resonate with the fourfold division. The occult, esoteric map of hell is not underground. It is the map. And once you start seeing the quadrants, the obelisks, the compass motifs, you can't unsee them, because they're not symbols anymore. They're mechanisms. Some orders, like certain branches of the Rosicrucians or Thelema, openly reference the cardinal kings in their writings, though often in cryptic form. Guardians of the watchtowers, four great ones, elemental kings. But the deeper initiates know, these are not elements, they are thrones. That's why the higher you go in secret societies, the more geometric the teachings become. Circles, crosses, pyramids, grids. Geometry is memory, and memory is alignment. To serve the kings is not to chant their names. It is to construct your world according to their design. I once spoke with a defector from a small but influential esoteric order in Europe. He claimed their inner teachings revolved around maintaining spiritual balance across the four quadrants. Members were assigned directions, not roles. Each was expected to embody a king's principle in daily life. They didn't worship, they mirrored. And through that mirroring, the throne stayed strong. He described how they'd build structures in remote areas, always with four towers, four gates, four paths. The world is already sealed, he told me. We just keep it humming. And perhaps the most disturbing part, most of this isn't even hidden. It's in plain view. The cross at the city center, the temple with four guardians, the political system with four cardinal ideologies, all echoes, all anchors, because once the ritual of quadrants is set, the kings no longer need to speak, they simply are. But then a question arises. If the world is sealed by four, why do some still feel a pull beyond them, toward something older, toward a throne not bound by directions, but buried beneath them? To awaken without kneeling is to recognize the kings and refuse their game. This is the most dangerous form of gnosis, not rebellion, not submission, but detachment. In demonology explained, you're taught to either summon or protect, obey or resist. But the fifth key is different. It's the understanding that the four cardinal kings aren't just entities, but mirrors, each reflecting a quadrant of the soul. And the moment you realize that, you stop being a piece on their board. You become the board itself. The structure doesn't collapse when defied. It collapses when it's outgrown. That's what the ancient mystics meant by liberation, not escape, but transcendence. The fifth key is not a throne, it's an axis, a central point from which all directions extend, but which itself does not move. In occult knowledge, this has been called the silent heart, the eye within, the uncarved stone. It's what remains when desire, memory, thought, and form dissolve. A Maimon can't seduce it, Corson can't bind it, Zimenia can't erase it, Gap can't distort it, because it does not seek, it observes. This key isn't given in rituals, it's uncovered in stillness, in that moment between invocations, where all seals fade. That's where the fifth presence breathes. To hold the fifth key is to walk into the ritual circle and see it for what it is, a structure designed to shape consciousness, not to liberate it. That's why even advanced practitioners often stall. They reach the threshold of the four kings, but keep orbiting. The rituals become more complex, the symbols more elaborate, but they're still inside the square. The true escape isn't through more knowledge, it's through non-alignment. The kings don't fear disobedience. They fear irrelevance. They fear the initiate who steps outside the map and simply watches. And this is the most counterintuitive part. The fifth key doesn't destroy the kings. It honors them. It sees their thrones as necessary reflections within duality, but refuses to identify with any. That's why awakening without kneeling feels like madness at first. You stop resonating with the entire system, religious, magical, societal. You see the seals not as curses, but as coordinates. You understand that every distortion was part of your map, but not your identity. And in that space, you stop serving. You start creating. There are ancient stories, kept only in oral traditions, of mystics who disappeared from the four paths entirely. They weren't exiled. They vanished, not into darkness, but into stillness. The fifth key is what they carried. Some call it unbinding, others self-throning. It's the realization that the only true throne is within, and it doesn't command, it remembers. In this state, you no longer invoke, you invite. You no longer fight distortion, you witness it. And slowly, the influence of the kings fades like echoes in a dream you've outgrown. This doesn't mean the kings vanish. Their thrones still turn, the compass still spins, but you're no longer on it. You're watching from above. And from there, the structure no longer controls. It becomes art, myth, story. And in that story, you're not the victim, not the worshipper, not the rebel. You're the witness, the one who carries the fifth key, the one who saw through the game and stepped beyond it. So the real question isn't, how do I defeat the kings? It's, why did I believe I needed to? The only safe place is not above them. It's beyond them. And from that place, you don't rule. You remember. You realign. And maybe, just maybe, you finally return. You've walked through 7 thrones, not to reject them, not to worship them, but to remember what they are, reflections. Now the question is, Which one was already sitting inside you? Because the princes of hell don't ask for your fear. They don't even ask for your devotion. They simply ask, are you aware of what you've become? You're not here to be saved. You're here to see clearly. To recognize that what we call demons are often the names we give to our deepest forces before they are understood. And maybe, just maybe, they've been waiting all this time, not to possess you, but to awaken with you. So tell me, which of the 7 whispered your name the loudest? Which throne felt like home? Type it in the comments. Let the others know which current you resonate with. And if this felt more like a mirror than a message, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the map doesn't end here, and neither do you.